Payton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time, again with a quote from James Clear. You are as old as the risks you take. In many ways, aging is not the process of growing old, but rather the slow death of becoming overly protective, scared and worried about losing what you have. Youth is found in the energy of going for it, taking the risk and trusting that you'll figure it out along the way. So, what do you think about that? Aging, growing old, and youth through the lens of risk.
Yeah, wonderful quote. And it is so true if I think about the people that I know and just looking around, that obviously the concept of being old or aging or growing old can feel pejorative and tied directly to someone's age, how many rotations or how many orbits around the sun they've had. But the truth is that I have one friend who is about 70 years old, who is extremely flexible, in flow, living a great life, has great energy, and brings great energy to his interactions because he lives from a place of spontaneity and trust in this surrender to the flow. And then I know many people that are my age that are not nearly as free or as spontaneous or as flowy or as flexible in their way of being, in the true energy that they can bring to their life or potential adventures or things in front of them, interactions that they have, etc. And so this way of being of this energy, this vitality versus this rigidness and this sort of staleness is something that we have agency over in both directions. So it's very possible to be, and I hope and aspire to be 70 and living with this same energy. And I know that it is likewise a risk for me to be 28 and to have the opposite of spontaneous energy and flexibility and flow and vitality. And so, and not to mention, our energy and our way of being here vastly impacts our experience of the world, how fully we can engage with our life, how much we can drink and delight from the wonderful opportunities of experience and existence and creation that are right in front of us. And this paradigm that James Clear presents here of surrender and flow and movement and flexibility on one hand versus rigidity and attachment and the ways of being that are rooted in fear and craving that can get in the way of our freedom on the other hand is totally central to our relationship with this and our way of being with it all. My question for you is, what do you think is behind this, the things that get in the way? So he talks about the the attachments and the clinging on and being too fearful and rigid to take risks. What do you think those are rooted in? And how might we think about these ways that we get in the way or we actively do things or allow conditions of our life that get in the way of us being the most vital, the most energized, and the most flowy, spontaneous, flexible versions of ourselves in our life?
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, what is getting in the way is our human nature. We evolved as creatures with an aversion for loss, with a big loss aversion for downsides, just because it made rational sense because of survival. Those who ran when they heard something flickering in the bush, they had a better chance of surviving until they created some offsprings before the lion ate them, rather than maybe just a squirrel and then the lion ate them. So the
And
loss
actually,
aversion.
to interrupt, I actually had a flickering in a bush last week where I walked up close to it, and it was a 12-foot crocodile. So I can attest to this from my own experience. The adventurous nature and overruling my DNA almost cost my genes quite a bit in this case.
Yeah, there we see the downsides of being
Yeah.
overly trusting and flowing and overly trusting the universe that everything will work out, because it can be too much. In the rare cases, it is too much. In the rare cases, there's really a lion or a giant crocodile behind the bush. So this is getting in the way. So, and therefore, evolution, yeah, made us precautious. but because of obvious reasons for survival, which is very good if you want to survive in all the possible universes, because yeah, survival is gained by avoiding the downsides which lead to ruin, by avoiding death situations or ruinous situations. Maybe your mental health, which is ruined because of you get overly stressed or traumatized. Maybe your physical wealth that gets ruined because you become a paraplegic, or social wealth that gets ruined if you destroy your reputation just because of dumb things. You pay a big dumb tax if you just put all of your reputation on the line, or financial or time, whatever. So survival. The flip side of it is the identity and ego barrier, which hinders us to grow, because we don't want to risk changing our identity, because maybe we risk embarrassment. And this is a barrier that hinders us to take the risk and grow. So this is clinging or risking is always a matter of survival or perceived survival. So there's this knob you can tweak, and it's your perception. It's your perception of what is really risky or what is not really risky. What is really a thing that you should fear, or what is not a thing that you should fear. Because in our perception, a lion of terror can just become an ant of equanimity if we act through it. If we go towards and approach a person on the street with our question that we didn't want to approach because of we might risk embarrassment, because maybe we look dumb or the people will laugh or whatever. If you just act through it, it will change within your perception. And yeah, what do you think about this change in perception and your control over this, with exposing yourself towards the perceived risks and then contrasting it with the reality you then experience?
I couldn't agree more about that pesky human nature of ours. And it's so true that our bodies are wired to survive. And we grew up as a species in an environment that was totally different than the one that we find ourselves now. We were in these little tribes, little bands of, let's say, 50 to 200 humans for the vast majority of generations of our history. And so getting kicked out of these little bands literally meant that we would die. And so this feeling and this fear of ostracization was actually life and death back then, and it's wired as such in our brains. But at the time, there were only this limited group right around us that we had to grapple with. And there was this reciprocity where if they were an asshole to us, they also bore this same risk. And so the stimulus was way lower back then, and the response was actually fit to the stimulus. And now we encounter way more than 150 people, and the people that we encounter don't have nearly the same downside of being assholes or treating us unfairly or uncharitably, because there's way more of them, to where our surface area for encountering the 1 out of 100 assholes is way higher if we encounter 500 people per day or 1,000 people per day online or whatever. And so it's very notable, or it's very worthwhile taking a look at the ways that our brains and our systems and our fears are miscalibrated to the environment and the stimuli that we actually encounter right now. And you're totally right too about this paper tiger effect. As long as this tiger is over there and we run away from it, if it's made of paper, it will feel like a real tiger to us. And we'll treat it like a real tiger as long as we are fleeing from it. And because there's no way for us to feel that it does not actually hold the danger it has, as long as we are running away and only seeing and going off of our first perception. And it is in this leaning in and facing and running right through that paper tiger and facing our fears and exposing ourselves to it and opening ourselves to these very painful, insecure, uncomfortable emotions in our body that we tend to flee from or want to cover up, that we can actually feel through exposure that, oh, I just let that paper tiger attack me and I'm fine. I survived that. I actually can still go home and eat dinner and talk to my friend and call my other friend and sleep tonight and then go to work tomorrow and then drive my my thing around and go to the grocery store, and I'm like, my arm still works. I'm still here, and actually, oh,
Mm.
maybe that wasn't the tiger that I thought it was. But that's the only way we can learn, is by actually leaning in and encountering these things, facing these things. If we resist and we flee based off of our perception, then our perception really doesn't get recalibrated to reality. And so this exposure and this courage in the face of this is key, in my opinion, too, to shifting our perceptions. My my other question for you here is, in the facing of these fears, in the how he calls it, like taking risks and figuring it out along the way, in leaning into these things and discovering whether or not this thing we fear is real and truly as dangerous as it seems, or if this is something that we truly can bear, that we have the capacity for, and that we're far more powerful if we learn to lean into it and face it. How can we cultivate that? What are the necessary conditions of taking risks and trusting the spontaneity as it arises within our life and within our path?
Well, the necessary conditions are, in my opinion, also often subjective conditions in terms of you have to decide for yourself. You have to bear the full responsibility for you taking action and bearing the consequences of your actions. So if it's your decision and you have 100% of the responsibility for your own decision, it makes you the architect of your life. And then it makes it, for me, it makes it the right condition either for taking risk or for trusting the flow, because you decide firsthand. So for me, it's the first thing is the subjective condition of it's your decision. And if you really want to take a risk, then in my opinion, you should play to win. That said, is like you try to tweak the odds in your favor. You try to do the best of your ability, either to figure it out and then to accept whatever happens because you take the responsibility for your decisions, and also the consequences that follow. Another condition, in my opinion, if you want to take the risk and trust the flow, having a social support network. The psychosocial support is very important. Mentors, friends, our conversations are so valuable for me in like staying on a thought pattern and riding the wave and sharing ideas, discussing topics, talking about life and events, whatever. It's so valuable to have this psychosocial support. Thank you very much for that, my friend.
Likewise.
Or mentors, people who have already climbed up the ladder we want to climb up, and now they tell us about their way and their path, about their sacrifices, and we imagine, do we want to take this ladder or this route or this path? Do we want to trailblaze our own path? So mentors on the people you surround yourself with, psychosocial support. A great team is very important, because when you work on something with passion and high energy, then it's also important. I guess it's the most important thing to have the right team, to put the right people in the right seats, and making sure that you would also chug a beer with them, because you have so much time with the people who you work with, that it better be time not wasted in poor social behavior or poor low trust environment. So a good plan, good systems, good people, and then you can divide and conquer, take the risk and trust the flow, because you set everything in place. You tweak the characteristics of the system you want to use, because you want to be guided towards whatever vision you have through the things and the systems you have and create, in my opinion. What do you think about necessary conditions for taking risks?
I do agree with your thoughts on this social support. This is something that I was a very slow learner on, actually. I had a few years ago, I entered into a very difficult phase of my life where I was really going all out and I had no spare time or energy. And I felt as if I had to put every hour of waking time that I had into this this business that I was struggling to turn around. And my response to this felt like I had to, and maybe I did actually have no choice in this circumstance. Maybe I did, but what I chose to do was really forego all of my social life, my social circles, spending time with friends, interacting with these support networks. And I experienced that the isolation that came from that made me far less resilient to the paper tigers that I was fighting in my life, the things that I feared, the things that went bad, the negative energies I took in. Just sitting in my own self on an island, I was less able to regulate these things. And then a few weeks ago in my own life, I was grappling with my own a new paper tiger, and I was in this state of real contraction in my mind that was way out of proportion to what actually was going on in my life. It was totally a mountain out of a molehill that I was making, but I was fortunate that I was on a trip with a group of colleagues and friends that like I had these things going in my mind, this hall of mirrors of contraction and self-concern and doubt or whatever. And then I would go and have a meal with these five people, and I would feel that these people are still interacting with me. These people still respect me. These people still are enjoying my company, and vice versa. I can still have this group and these connections despite the ups and downs that I was going on within my emotions because I had some distorted thinking and in this sort of fragility of ego or self-image in that moment. And it showed me again how important that can be. Just as we are actually like animals, and we have certain psychological wirings, and that's connection and social support is a very important component of health and balance, especially as we lean in and we face various challenging stimuli in our lives. The other condition that you mentioned, this way that, or I guess the thing that gets in the way of this ability of flow and freedom and flexibility and greater capacity, is this identity, this ego, this self-image, that is it does want, in some way it has some logic that it wants to help. It's there to plan for us. It's there to do this for us. It's there to protect us from certain things or make sure that we're seen in a certain way. And there's a balance, there's a golden mean with these things. It's not that we never want to have a thought about the future or the past or have no concern about the effects that we're having on other people's energy or what that might mean for our own lives, whatever. It's a part of the team. But when it totally takes over and it becomes a dictator rather than a team player, and it gets in the way of our awareness, then it becomes a far lesser capacity for us to live from. And it kind of riddles us with fear about what might happen. It rehearses and pre-manages future interactions in a way that cuts us off from the source and cuts us off from our ability to be spontaneous and to actually bring our awareness to allow our responses to fit the true full context and energy of the situation that is spontaneously unfolding right now. And instead, it causes us to be sort of up in the cockpit, disembodied, in a posture of separateness from the people we're around and from the real life circumstance that it sort of weaves a web or a veil in front of. And so having a good, better balance, and so not necessarily like making it an exile, but actually integrating it, being aware of it, welcoming it, but then leading it from a place of greater capacity and flow, leading it from the heart rather than it being the dictator of our whole system. This is a foundation for a wise and embodied and creative way of showing up in our lives in a greater capacity to flow and move with the challenges and the challenging energy, as well as the opportunities and the ways that we can open ourselves to a greater and richer experience in our lives with what's really emerging in front of us, with the real humans and the real situations that arise once again, that unfold before us in our lives in ways that we can't perfectly anticipate and inscribe out in language in advance. And when we're finding this golden mean, when we want to know that, okay, yes, we're not going to have zero thoughts about the past and the future, or zero concern for anything, there's going to be this thinker part, this manager part that's an important member of the team, but we want to have this right balance. We want to have a golden mean where we are not inhibited, and we are not, also, on the other hand, we are not reckless. So what are the indicators of the golden mean? What are the indicators that we are not being reckless and irresponsible stewards of ourselves and our lives, but at the same time, we are not being rigid and inhibited by our attachments and by our sort of structure of our identity? How can we find this golden mean, and what does that golden mean? How can we tell if we're striking the right balance on that?
Well, I think it is about one, it's the integrity, whether you really want to be in that position of being the steward of these resources, or if you really want to stay attached to whatever you feel like is valuable to stay attached to. And it's the merits. So whether you really have the ability and the skills and the necessary conditions fulfilled so that you can pursue your goal and take the risk. And that leads towards the point in the beginning that it's all about survival. So if you mitigate the risk and minimize the risk of ruin, then you'll probably be fine. And you asked about indicators, and I think if you look at a person or at a group, or at a person, for example, and look at the people he surrounds himself with. Look at his 5 closest contacts, for example, and then you can see, is the environment the right environment so that I would bet on him or her winning in this battle, or winning in this pursuit, risking it and then trying to gain from it. So I wouldn't trust someone who's a drug addict, for example, with my investment in his pursuits of his dream of building something great. Because when you see the downsides, the probability is just higher that he will fall into old patterns and habits when you see his friends just staying in their old ways. And so it is about minimizing the risks and visibly seeing that you have thought through the whole process and made a point for yourself. The integrity of, hey, it is me, it is life calling me, it is the idea calling me towards it. And I'm the one who needs to fulfill it, because it's the unique thing about my mission. It is the purpose of my existence, maybe. This is a strong indicator. Doesn't have to be that strong, but I believe this is a good indicator. So, and what do you think is a golden mean?
Yeah, I would say that the golden mean with this, as well as many other things, is, to your point, the integrity is a big part in this sense of alignment. And I think that in a lot of these areas where we don't want to be too much this way, we don't want to be too much this way, and the our way of being needs to be not just in a vacuum at balance, but actually fit to the full context that's within and around us at that moment in time. And so it can't be this set of narratives. It can't be a set of rules and language where one word is put in front of the other if we actually want to account for the whole equation here. And so finding golden means here and anywhere requires awareness, and requires actually prizing the voice of awareness over the voice of our narratives, over the voice of our language and our words. So if I have this this swimming cacophony of narrative and story and identity and liking and not liking and wants and not wants in my brain, in my thinking part, but yet I feel this calling in my body toward moving in this direction, toward moving in that direction, towards telling me intuitively if I am in integrity or out of integrity, within alignment or out of alignment, if I need to act in this way and meet a situation with force and opposition, or if I need to accept what's right in front of me and flow, and shift my direction and yield to whatever is in front of me. The real indicator of the real voice of wisdom in these situations must arise from our heart, must arise from our body's knowledge, our body's wisdom, and our awareness and our intuition. The temptation is and the issue is that that voice, that feeling, that resonance that we feel between us is one voice, and our words and our narratives are another voice, and they don't actually talk the same language. They're not incommensurable where you can stack them up one side and another on a pros and cons list and expect this side to make a better argument. The intuition and the wisdom doesn't make good arguments. It actually tells us the full wisdom without showing all of its work. And so in my experience, the way to get better at listening to this over time is to sometimes listen to our intuition, and then sometimes inevitably ignore our intuition and go with our narratives and go with our what our identities want. And it's inevitable that we will inadvertently do this or be pulled into this at times. And then just bring awareness and pay attention to the fruits. Have the openness to look back at where our decisions came from and what came from them. And then we'll see time and time again, the track record will be unbelievably clear that when I follow my awareness, when I follow my intuition, when I listen to my heart's wisdom, then the fruits are exactly what they need. I show up exactly how I need in this moment. My judgment is well tailored to what is true and what is in integrity and alignment with me. And the ways that things go, the fruits that bear, are delicious and healthy. Then when I listen to this voice, when I listen to the words and the narratives and the identities over the intuition, when I allow it to cover it up because it makes a better argument, the fruits of this do not serve me in the end. They yield bad results. They yield poor outcomes and worse cycles of negative energy in my life, and prevent me from being the best I could be, or from walking the best path that I could walk. So it's really like we've got to learn. Well, at least for me, I'm a slow learner with these things, and so I've had to learn them the hard way. And over and over and over, I've seen this play out on both sides. And then it's just over time seeing that, wow, the good fruit came from here, the bad fruit came from here. Next time when these two things disagree, I know who I intend to listen to at least. And then I can learn to listen to the body's wisdom, the heart's wisdom, a greater and greater percentage of the time. Well, for me at least, still remaining extremely imperfect on this path. But this is where we must find wisdom.
Yeah, same here, same here. It is like I want to pursue the wisdom of my gut, my heart, and my mind all together, you know? And I know sometimes my gut feeling doesn't tell me, it does tell me, oh, there's something wrong. And I still have the narrative overruling my gut. And
Yes.
then I feel the consequences, and they are painful times. Sometimes, and then yeah, I learn again, but then I say, oh, but I wished for that to be true. So it's like wanting to stay in illusion or facing the painful reality. Um, a reality will always win over the illusion
Yeah.
sooner or later. So this is the thing to look for. Yeah, we want to vote for our better version, and you don't have to gain 100% of all the votes in a democracy
Yeah.
to make progress on who governs. So you only have to really vote more often than not for the person you
and
want to become. Yeah.
and I've learned myself that perfection is so far not on the table. I'm going to continue to not be 100%, and maybe eventually I will get close. I believe and see that eventually I will get in the right direction on this in a higher percentage of the time. But I have no illusions that I am on the cusp of being perfect on any of these things. And another aspect that I'd like to call out that I've been thinking about a lot recently as it relates to this is it's not just in the moment that we have this and this and this in these voices, but it's actually there's a time related aspect of these things, because the thoughts, the narratives, these actually time travel in ways that are sometimes very, like, it's an important tool for these reasons. We can go to
Mm.
the future and map things out and look at cause and effect and project an image of how things will be and a story about how things will be. And there's some ways that we can do forecasts with our thinking brain that are plans, or they are anticipations, and they are
Mm.
simulations of the future. And that is one important voice at the table. To your point, it's not something that should have no voice at the table. Our wisdom, our gut, and our heart, they are by their nature spontaneous. Flow is by its nature spontaneous. Wisdom is by its nature spontaneous. And so this is where trust and faith come in my opinion. And there's a sense that if I have something if I anticipate some very difficult thing that will arise tomorrow, for instance, some situation that may fully challenge me, that may be very high stakes, etc., the temptation is going to be to fully plan it out, fully map it out, and say that, okay, the thinking, planning brain, that is the dictator here. This is the ruling faculty. And in some sense, you might want to calculate some cause and effect and understand the specifics and details of the future and how it will play out. This can even inform the heart and the gut in some ways. However, the place where I tend to go with it is go way too far, and to say that, okay, the whole way that I show up and whatever is going to go on should be dictated and pre-planned all out in advance and pre-specified. That cuts us off from spontaneity. And frustratingly, to some of us, me included, who love this or who have this temptation to want to control things, spontaneity is never going to be something where we feel in control. It's something that we
Mm.
must have faith and trust and give ourselves to in order to get out of the way and allow it to emerge and flow through us and present the greatest flow and the ripe action in that moment, the thing that fits the real full context, the energy, and the situation that arises right now. And so this is
Mhm.
where some faith comes in, where if I know something is going to happen that will be pulling me or pushing me to my max capacity in one way or another. Yes, there may be some thoughts in advance, but at some point I need to say that, okay, yeah, I have thought of these things, but now is the time for me to actually the night before step out of the way, the planner step out of the way, so that I can connect and listen to my body and my heart, and remind myself that these things are going to be what I will want to trust and follow spontaneously as they arise in the flow of the moment, because I know from
Mhm.
my past that the fruit of trusting in that spontaneity will be so much greater than any plan that I could make that will not survive first contact with reality, that will always be out of calibration as soon as the full context of the moment arises. And so this
Mhm.
future versus in the now way of being in this requires this faith, this trust in the spontaneous unfolding. And there is no other way, if we want to be our best self, than to have this stepping back, hands up. I know I'm not in control, and I'm going to fully surrender to the fact that the best way of being comes with a cost of insecurity and relinquishing of our control.
And there comes, additionally, the idea comes to mind that have your standard operating procedures for how you want to be, how you want to deal with people, with the world surrounding you, but then have creative plans as well, and then deal in reality with fallback to your systems
Yes.
that you have. Fall back
Yes.
to the ways you wanted to define yourself before, like fall back to the standard operating procedures, like in the military where it gets highly chaotic. In the Navy SEALs, for example, they always train their standard procedures, and in the chaos of the battlefield, it is just very hard to follow the plan because it always changes. Yeah, and therefore you connected. Okay, connect your heart and mind and trust your intuition. Give yourself fully towards it. Uh, the idea of this is what makes you come alive comes into mind. The preparing your conditions to become alive makes you better in your ability, in your capacity to react spontaneously towards the reality that comes to you. So ask yourself, okay, maybe what makes me come alive? And there's this saying that don't ask what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who become alive.
Mm.
And you have a much greater capacity if you develop just what makes you uniquely you, what you do or create, or how you perform, or whatever, which is coming from your core. And then with this aliveness, you have this flow and ability to trust in a better capacity, in my opinion. So create some art, generate some energy for yourself so that you can follow the path that you mapped out for yourself and react spontaneously. Yeah, going back to the quote from the beginning, you are as old as the risks you take. So how could I become old tomorrow? And then the inverse of it. How can I avoid becoming old tomorrow?
Yes, yes. So what prevents us from taking risks? I think it is our attachments in many cases. We are afraid of losing this thing that we already have. We're afraid of losing our relationships. We're afraid of losing our reputation. We're afraid of losing our self-image. We're afraid of losing our possessions or our lifestyle or our comfort and clinging to our own comfort. All of these attachments are things where we hold on to. When they get ripped out of our hands, we get rope burn, and they cause us to live from a place where we treat ourselves like we are fragile. And we treat ourselves like we are fragile, and so we don't face that paper tiger. We do not actually lean into the things that we fear, which makes them become bigger in our perception. The inversion, as I see it, is surrender. The inversion, as I see it, is saying that I hold all of these things are with me, and I'm grateful for them for now. I will be a good steward of these things, and I will not discard the gifts that I'm given or the blessings that have arisen in my life. But ultimately, I did not create any of these circumstances in my life. I'm a part of all this cause and effect, and I accept that sometimes I will have my comfort, sometimes I will not have my comfort. Sometimes I will have some relationships, sometimes I will not have some relationships. Sometimes I will have this feeling of positive momentum in ascent. Sometimes I will feel this negative momentum in descent. And so this fully giving ourselves to the moment and not holding on tightly to any of the things in our lives. Yes, we will be a good steward. Yes, we will honor what we are given and the opportunities and the relationships and the energies and the positivities within it, of course. But at the end of the day, we can give ourselves to whatever arises with the spirit of trust and full surrender. This is where, when we can relax our way of being, we can go from being rigid to being flexible and yielding and able to move with reality, shift with reality, and have this greater capacity to absorb what is going on. When you see water and ice, the ice is rigid, the water is not. If you take ice and you hit it with a hammer, it will break and shatter everywhere because it is rigid. If you take water and hit it with a hammer, it will absorb it because it is flexible and not rigid. And this can be an image about our way of being. The water is not attached to its shape. The water is not rigid. So being like water in our lives and flowing with things because we have in our hearts fully given it up, fully surrendered, and said that at the end of the day, none of this is, these are all blessings that were given to me. These are all blessings that can be taken from me. Sometimes I will feel this way. Sometimes I will feel this way. And this acceptance of the dynamic nature of reality is a foundation of this freedom, of this capacity, and of this ability to maintain our vitality and our best energy and flow during an inherently unstable existence. How do you think about the cause of our rigidity and the inversions that we may want to pursue?
Yeah, well, as you said, it's giving yourself to it is the cause of growing younger again, of being flexible, not yielding. And also rigidity in terms of structure, in terms of ego, in terms of an identity we want to keep, in terms of societal corset which people expect us that we behave in a certain kind of way. This makes us become old. It's like there's in Germany there was this, or is, I don't know, I don't follow, but there's this politician. It's a young guy in a very rigid suit, expressing himself with a very formal language, seemingly a robot or something, and he looks like maybe 60, but is 26, you know? And then
Mm.
there's this joke about, oh, this is German's oldest 26-year-old. So because of his rigidity, you know? There you have the recipe for growing old, maybe no, not in every kind of dimension, but at least in the perceived dimension. I don't know about him whatsoever, but you have rigidity as a root cause of a perceived age. And if you perceive yourself in a rigid manner, you will likely act as a very old person as well. Stiff, not able to move, not able to stretch, not able to carry your own bag, because you feel yourself being fragile. You feel yourself fearing paper tigers, and so you don't trust yourself. So it's about trusting yourself again and proving to yourself that you can trust yourself and your intuition. And therefore, when you can trust yourself and your intuition, you can give yourself to the flow and towards faith and belief, like you said, that you have the ability to figure things out, and that the end will be good. And if it's not good yet, it's not the end, because it doesn't matter how often you fall, it matters that you get up again. So you play to win, and that means you have to get up again, and that means
Yes.
you do it.
Beautiful, my friend. Well, wonderful conversation. I will leave you with my intentions for the week ahead. The first is this posture of radical acceptance of the past, the present, and the future. And it's obvious that the past is outside of our control. Because it's already happened, there's nothing we can do. The present is also, we have no choice to accept because it's already here. It is non-negotiable. And then the harder one for me often is radical acceptance of the future. And this posture that a teacher told me maybe a couple weeks ago of proceed with trust in the spontaneous unfolding. Proceed with trust in the spontaneous unfolding. This is my intention of my way of being in the week to come. I think that a lot of the fruits of the way that I show up in the world and the quality of my subjective experience is downstream from the degree to which I can proceed with trust in the spontaneous unfolding of the unfolding within myself to meet the circumstances around me, the unfolding from others within and toward me and around me, and the spontaneous unfolding of reality, the ways that the world shifts, the ways that my settings shift, the way that all these things around me are continuously dynamic, outside of my control, outside of my grip, and they will shift in this direction, in this direction. I want to bring this trust, this confidence to all of that. How about you? Any intentions from you for the week to come?
Yeah, sure, sure. But it's a beautiful mantra. Proceed
Yes.
with trust in the spontaneous unfolding. It feels to me like watching a flower growing and blooming, which leads me
Yes.
to the metaphor or the question: and at which stage in life is a flower perfect? Is
Mm,
it a seed? Is it when it grows up? Is it when it blooms? Is it when it dies? It's in every stage, which is a necessary precondition or post-condition for being as beautiful as it can become. So at any point, this spontaneous unfolding is what is perfect in itself, you know. So, and therefore, seeing a flower and connecting it to its, doesn't matter at which stage the flower is a flower and it's perfect like it is. With that kind of frame, it makes trust easier, in my opinion. So thank you for
mhm.
sharing this beautiful sentence. My
Yes.
intention is also has to do something with control. I try to control my schedule. I try to control what I work on. But trusting the flow of my intuition and my curiosity is now my intention for this week. I want to follow my curiosity, follow the ideas which the world presents to me, and try to pursue them until they do not bloom any longer, and therefore play uh, until the flower dies.
Wonderful.
So,
Wonderful.
thank you,
Thank you
my
for
friend.
sharing your thoughts, my friend. I love this conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
Looking forward to it. See you next week, brother. Bye, Peyton.
See you next week, my brother. Take it easy.